Hey, this is Mike Matthews from Muscle Life and Legion Athletics. And in this video podcast, I want to talk fat gain. And I want to answer a question that I've been asked many times, and that is, how much damage can you do in a day? How much fat can you gain if you just ate calories all day? If you had an all-out, blowout, 10,000 calorie day, how much fat can you gain? And I actually have good news because it's probably not as much as you think. Now, you always will gain some amount of fat. If you overeat, if you eat more calories than you burn, there's some amount of fat gain that's going to occur. Now, of course, I mean, except for if you ate 5 calories more than you burned, yeah, there's probably no real fat gain that's going to occur. But if you eat 500 calories more than you burned in a day, regardless of where those calories came from macronutritionally, there will be some amount of fat gain, but not as much as you're probably thinking. Now, after looking at quite a few overfeeding studies, so these are studies where scientists intentionally feed people more calories than they're burning, my conclusion is that, and this is just this is a rule of thumb. It's not going to be true for everybody, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But generally speaking, I think about 1/5 of a pound of fat gain per 1,000 calories above expenditure is a reasonable assumption. So, let's say you burned 2,500 calories in a day and you ate 7,500 calories, and that'd be impressive. That's a binge day. Let's say the most fat you can probably gain from that is about a pound. And if we take those numbers and apply them to more real world circumstance, I mean, sure, binging does occur, but what occurs more often, at least what I've seen more often in working with thousands and thousands of people, is a couple thousand calories over expenditure. So again, let's say you burn 2,500 in a day, and whether it's a cheat day or a big cheat meal, you go out to a restaurant and eat a bunch of food, you end the day at 4,500 calories, right? So you're 2,000 calories over expenditure. In that scenario, let's say that the most fat gain you can probably expect, regardless of where those calories came from macronutritionally, is probably about 1/2 pound. Now, you might be wondering why you've done that many times, because we all have. You go for your cheat meal or whatever, you go to a restaurant and just eat a bunch of stuff, and then you wake up 4 pounds heavier. So what's happening? If you only can gain about 1/2 pound of body fat from that, where are the other 3.5 pounds coming from? And the simple answer there is water and glycogen, because these cheat meals, or sometimes it's cheat days, the cheat foods, the stuff that tastes really good, generally is carb dense. So we're talking about a lot of carbohydrates, and we're also talking about a lot of sodium, especially with restaurant food. The rule, when it comes to like salt in cooking, the rule is you want to be using a lot of salt. Meals should generally be salted right up to the point where if you keep going, it just becomes too salty. There's a sweet spot right below that where you just get maximum deliciousness, and that's what you get at restaurants, generally very high sodium meals. And when you combine a lot of carbs with a lot of sodium, and of course you're also drinking liquids and eating, there's liquid in food that we eat, that results in a lot of water retention. And you've probably seen that because you get the 4 pounds of weight gain overnight and you freak out, and maybe you really cut your calories the next few days and really cut your carbs. So you eat a lot less carbs, and also your sodium intake naturally comes down unless you just salt the shit out of everything all the time. And then, oh, look at that, the more or less all of the 4 pounds that you gained overnight is gone in a few days. That's because the body then, that additional water and carbohydrate retention in the form of glycogen, primarily in the muscles and liver, gets flushed out, so to speak. You get back to your normal levels of water and glycogen retention, and then you see again that huge uptick in weight then just quickly dissipates. Now, another thing you should know about overfeeding is that research shows that when we're talking about caloric surpluses, and particularly when we're talking about caloric surpluses in resistance-trained individuals, so those of us that work our muscles and that exercise regularly, not all macros are the same as far as fat gain goes. For example, there are a number of studies, 4, if I remember correctly, that have shown that when you're in a surplus, very high protein dieting, so we're talking about protein intake upward of like 1.7 to 2.2 grams per pound of body weight per day, results in less fat gain than high protein dieting when calories are matched, and the high protein dieting being around 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. So what that tells us then is those of us that resistance train regularly, that regularly train our muscles, when we are overfeeding, protein seems to result in less fat gain than carbs or fats. And the reason why I draw that distinction between resistance trained individuals and untrained individuals, so people that train their muscles and people that don't, is again, we have, if I remember correctly, about 4 studies that show in resistance trained individuals that appears to be true, but then there are overfeeding studies in just untrained everyday normal people that shows that that is not true. That in that case, it does appear that it kind of like a calorie is a calorie as far as the surplus goes, that fat gain, whether it's overfeeding protein versus carbs versus fat, it's going to be about the same. So how we can apply that then is twofold. One, we can continue our resistance training workouts when we're going to be overfeeding. So take the holidays, right? We know we're going to be overfeeding. Continue training your muscles. Even if you can't necessarily get into the gym or do your normal routine, if you can just do body weight stuff every day, whatever you can do, if you can go, let's say your normal routine has you in the gym 3-4 days a week, maybe 5-6 days, who knows? If now you can only get into the gym maybe 1 day a week, you could do a full body workout. If let's say 2 days a week, then I'd recommend either 2 full body workouts or maybe an upper and lower if you really want to push more intensely. An upper and lower is going to be better for that. And if you can't even get to the gym at all, you can do something. You can do push-ups. You can do all types of body weight squat variations. Even stuff like pistol squats are actually quite difficult. You can do split squats. You can get a simple pull-up bar and do pull-ups. There's a lot you can do. Or maybe even you have a TRX. Just again, if you can do something to continue training your muscles, you are going to gain less body fat, not just because of increasing energy expenditure, but also because of something called nutrient partitioning. So basically, you are giving your body other things. I mean, this is a simplification, but you're giving your body things to do with the calories that you're eating other than just store them as body fat. So that's the first tip is when you're going to be overfeeding, continue your resistance training workouts. And the second tip is if it's worth it to you in terms of enjoyment, because obviously most overfeeding just comes down to eating delicious food. If you enjoy overfeeding on protein, so if you can get just as much satisfaction out of eating, let's say, a big hunk of meat as a pie or something like that, then go for the high protein over the high carb and the high fat. That also is going to reduce fat gain. Another little tip is to keep your dietary fat intake as low as possible when you're overfeeding if you want to minimize fat gain. So again, I'm assuming that you want to minimize fat gain. Maybe you don't care, and I understand. I usually don't go for stretches over the holidays. Like I'm not going to go for 3 weeks saying I don't care how much fat I gain, I'm just going to eat everything. I'm not that much of a foodie anyway, but there are definitely meals where if it's like Thanksgiving or if it's one of a few Christmas dinners that my family and extended family has, yeah, I'm just going to enjoy myself and I don't care. Again, I know that what's the worst that could happen from this one meal? A half a pound of fat gain maybe, and that's like eating myself until I'm in pain. Oh well. But when I want to minimize fat gain, keeping my dietary fat intake as low as possible helps tremendously because pretty much all of the dietary fat that you eat gets stored as body fat. And this, again, has been shown in overfeeding studies. And that's one of the primary reasons we need to eat dietary fat is to replenish our body's fat stores, which are being tapped into every single day. Unless we were literally just to be eating food all day, our body does have to go to our body fat for energy when it runs out of energy provided by food. And if it didn't have a way to replenish that body fat, of course, eventually we would run out of body fat and we would die. Again, you can find this in studies where there's a point where if you lose too much body fat, if you get too lean, you die. You have like a heart attack and that's the end of it. So you need to have a certain amount of body fat just to have your body function properly. Body fat is an organ. It is involved in production of hormones. It's not just an ugly, greasy flesh that we want to have as little of as possible. And so coming back to dietary fat, that is one of the primary roles, is to be stored as body fat. And it doesn't cost very much energy to store dietary fat as body fat because it's chemically very similar. Whereas carbohydrates, for example, are chemically very different than body fat, and therefore your body needs to process the carbohydrates to turn them into a very different type of molecule. That's known as de novo lipogenesis. And research shows that that doesn't really happen much. Like, you need to eat a shitload of carbs, or there are certain health conditions where actually DNL levels are much higher than usual or much higher than normal. But under normal circumstances, your body is not converting much of the carbs that you're eating. Very little, if any, actually are being converted into body fat. Your body is relying mainly on the dietary fat for that. Now, studies do show, though, if dietary fat goes too low, then DNL ramps up, and that your body then goes, well, shit, we need more of these fatty acids. Like, to survive, to continue functioning, we need more. We're not getting it through diet. What are we going to do? All right, let's take more of these carbs and let's make fatty acids out of those. It costs a lot of energy. It's not a very efficient process. Studies show it can cost up to 40% of the energy contained in a gram of carbohydrate just to process it and turn it into body fat. But the body's going to do what it has to do, right? And so then this is why, if we're looking at just a single day, and again, this has been confirmed in overfeeding research, that if you look at a single day or even a single meal, that a high carb, low fat meal, let's say it's just 1,000 calories, high carb, low fat, results in less immediate fat gain than a high fat, low carb meal. Again, let's peg it at 1,000 calories. That has been proven a number of times in overfeeding research. And so we can use that, if we are, let's say, we're planning a cheat meal or cheat day, or we're going to go to a restaurant or something, we can just be cognizant of that, and we can decide, hey, if I don't mind just eating a bunch of carbs here and keeping my fat intake low, I know that that's going to minimize fat gain. And that's it. That's, I think, everything that you need to know about overfeeding and fat gain. At least those are the practical highlights, and those are really the key takeaways that you can use to minimize fat gain when you are overeating, or just not worry about it. At least know that it's not that bad, and it's pretty easy to undo. Even if you have a really bad weekend and you gain a couple pounds of fat over the weekend, okay, you know what I mean? So what? So you cut for 10 days, let's say 10 to 14 days, and it's completely undone. Not a big deal. And again, just to summarize what we covered, it's one, that when you are overeating by a significant amount, you are going to gain some amount of fat, regardless of where those calories come from macronutritionally. And two, a good rule of thumb in terms of how much fat you can gain is about 1/5 of a pound per 1,000 calories you are over your caloric expenditure. And three, if you really want to minimize fat gain when you are overfeeding, continue doing your resistance training workouts and try to eat a lot of protein and a lot of carbs while keeping your fat intake really as low as you can, and still enjoy yourself. So I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please do give it a like and drop a comment down below letting me know what you thought. And also feel free to share any of your experiences with overfeeding, your strategies, what has worked well for you, what has not worked well for you, and anything else that you think is relevant to the discussion. Just drop it down in the comments below. And lastly, of course, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, what are you doing with your life? No, I'm kidding. Just if you like my content and you want to be notified when new content goes live, and if you want to make me happy, hit the subscribe button. It's free, and YouTube will let you know when I post the next video, which should be tomorrow. So that's it. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next video.